Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2020 Striking a Balance Caregiver Conference. This is our third day of presentations. My name is Rob Fabian with Age of Central Texas, and along with our partners over at the Area Agency on Aging of the Capital Area, we are so glad that you're joining us this morning for our keynote presentation with Marty Richards. We're so excited to have her with us, joining us as part of this year's 19th annual Striking a Balance Caregiver Conference. We're so glad that you're a part of this year because we know that caregiving has become even more of an adventure for all of us this year because of COVID. And so we're sharing a lot of resources and information and experts with you this year to help you with that caregiving journey. Before we get started this morning, we've got a quick video that we'd like to show you. Our executive directors from Age of Central Texas and the Area Agency on Aging would like to welcome you to our conference. And then we have a short video from our partners over at AARP Texas, who are our presenting sponsors for this year's conference.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 19th annual Striking a Balance Caregiver Conference, brought to you by the Area Agency on Aging of the Capital Area and Age of Central Texas. We are so happy to have you join us at our first ever virtual conference. We were talking about doing this, and we had a little bit of fear and trepidation, and then we thought, well, all of the caregivers that I know exude resiliency, they exude strength, they always have the ability to turn on a dime. So we thought, well, you know what? We better honor them and we better do the same thing and host this conference virtually so that we would have the opportunity to engage with y'all again. Some of you might know that we had a lot of repeat caregivers attending our conference every year. We didn't want to let them down, but we also did not want to miss out on bringing in new caregivers. And virtually, we have the opportunity to do that even more. So we are so excited to have you join us in a number of sessions that will address some of the issues that you might encounter during your caregiver journey. I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne.
Hi, all. My name is Suzanne Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of Age of Central Texas. And like Patty, I am so glad you've chosen to participate in the 19th annual Striking a Balance Conference. And what I love, in addition to what Patty just shared, is that if you chose, you could be sitting here in your PJs if you're so inclined. So, a special thank you to the Area Agency on Aging. Patty Bordy and her staff have been exceptional. And in addition, a special thank you to Rob Fabian of Age of Central Texas, whose leadership and technology skills have really allowed us to offer it in this format. I want to just share a quote. It's one of my favorites that I apply to my life, depending on where I sit within different challenges. And believe it or not, it's from Lena Horne. And what she said is that it's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way you carry it. So, we know caregiving is full of, swirling things like joy and love and stress. And I could go on and on that one, but we hope through the conference you find new strategies to help you carry that proverbial load, and that you feel supported by AGE and the AAA, and that know that we're here for you. So thanks so much for joining us in the conference, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. Take care.
Hello, I'm Jessica Lemon of AARP Texas, and I am pleased that AARP is a proud sponsor of the Striking a Balance Caregiver Conference. As a sponsor, we hope that you are gaining new insights into family caregiving and that you have the opportunity to connect with other caregivers and experts on aging. Family caregiving is a priority for AARP. It's essential to our work today, but that's not all. AARP is doing amazing things to make life better for the age 50+ population and generations that follow. We help people improve their financial well-being and their health. We want people to contribute to society and local communities and to fully enjoy life. Let's take a moment to discover more about what we're up to at AARP.
Our story begins more than 60 years ago inside an abandoned chicken coop where our founder discovered a retired teacher living, no home, no health care. So she said no to this injustice and yes to transforming lives. It's this drive, this compassion that inspired AARP. Today, we empower people to choose how they live as they age. We advocate for health and financial security. We strengthen communities everywhere. We are AARP, creating real possibilities.
I want you to know that AARP has a strong presence throughout Texas in many communities in this great state, including Austin, the capital city where I live and work. This year, AARP Texas is bringing opportunities to our members and others through virtual events like this one we're participating in today, and on platforms like Facebook Live. We hope you have the opportunity to enjoy these free offerings. Not only are there programs to help unpaid family caregivers, but there are presentations to help people avoid being the victims of fraud. We host fitness seminars, and we work with city leaders towards making this an even more age-friendly community. And know this, volunteers are critical to our mission. There are many opportunities for those who can give a little time to volunteer. You can learn more about these local happenings at aarp.org/tx or catch us at the AARP Texas Facebook page. Again, of course, family caregiving is a priority. Here in Texas and across the country, AARP is working with governors, state legislators, and community partners to take common sense steps to support America's 40 million family caregivers. We know that caregivers help their older parents, spouses, and loved ones live independently at home. And right now, AARP is fighting to protect nursing home residents against sickness, neglect, and isolation during the COVID-19 pandemic, while also educating family caregivers on how to advocate for their loved ones. Sadly, more than 62,000 nursing home residents and staff at those facilities have died from COVID-19, and the death toll continues to mount. These are mothers, fathers, grandparents, and spouses with families who love them. Nobody should be going through what nursing home residents and their families are experiencing today. Families want elected leaders to take action now to protect residents of nursing homes and other long-term care facilities. Right now, no state is doing a good enough job to protect these residents and staff. Congress must take immediate action to provide regular testing and personal protective equipment for residents and staff. There should also be timely and reliable reporting of COVID-19 cases and deaths. There also must be virtual visitation allowed for families. And finally, we urge lawmakers not to let nursing homes off the hook for abuse, neglect, and even death. Now is not the time to strip away the rights of nursing home residents. AARP will continue to fight for family caregivers and other families. We appreciate your support and for listening. We have many resources available for family caregivers just like you. One place to go for information is aarp.org/caregiving. Thank you for listening, and thank you for all that you do as family caregivers or to support caregivers.
Thank you, Patty and Suzanne. Thank you, Jessica, so much. And again, thank you for joining us this morning. Before we get started with the presentation, got just a few little housekeeping issues we want to go over for you. So all of our sessions, including this one, are being recorded. So in the event you have any technical issues, you get knocked off, you have to leave early today and don't get to finish the session, don't worry. We're recording the entire session and we're going to post it on YouTube, and we're going to send you that link a little bit later on this week. We're also going to make sure that you get all the handouts and information that was sent to you. Now, when you got your email for this session, as a reminder, we also sent you 3 links in that email, and want to go over those real fast because there's some great information there. Number 1, we sent you the program for our conference. That way you have got all the bios for all of our speakers along with the great information that's in the program. We also sent you the handouts for all the speakers, and so there's some great information there specifically for caregivers. And then third, we put together a whole collection of caregiving resources that we sent to you. The Area Agency on Aging in Age of Central Texas pulled together some great regional resources for you. So be sure and take a look at those links. We will also resend those links to you at the end of the session, along with all of the additional handouts and the links to all of the seminars. So we'll have all of that provided for you. Then finally, we want you to participate today because, again, this is for you. That is why we have been doing these conferences for 19 years, to give you the information you need to help you in your caregiving journey. So right down here, you have a chat feature. It looks like one of those bubbles that you see in the comic strips. Click on that, and it will bring up the chat over on the side. We want you to ask questions today because we want to answer your questions. So ask your questions during the session, and then at the end of Marty's presentation today, we're going to answer your questions. We have Marty along with some other experts who are going to be joining us, and we will answer your questions that you send to us. Now, because we are live and we do have a little bit of limited time today, we might not get to every single question. However, we're going to answer your question. If we're not able to get to it during the presentation, one of our experts from either Age of Central Texas or the Area Agency on Aging is going to email you directly and answer your question. All right, so be sure that you ask your questions during our presentation. Also, if for any reason you're having technical issues during this session, we're going to post over here into the chat contact information for Michelle Davis over the Area Agency on Aging. If you have an issue, you can give her a call, and we have got some volunteers from the tech field who are standing by to be our experts today to help you out. So if you're having an issue, you can call Michelle. She'll connect you with one of those experts, and they can help talk you through whatever issues you're having trying to either connect with the Zoom or stay on the Zoom meeting. All right. It is my pleasure to introduce Melissa Crawford with the Area Agency on Aging, and she is going to introduce Marty Richards, our speaker for today.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Good morning, everyone. I am Melissa Crawford, Caregiver Support Program Manager with the Area Agency on Aging of the Capital Area. And I am so excited about this session and the encouragement we can glean from it. In addition to my professional role in partnering with caregivers for a brief period of their journey, I have also been on a few caregiving journeys myself, both with my dad who had Parkinson's with vascular dementia, and then again, a few short years later, with my biggest hero who was wrapped in the sweetest package, my granny, who had Alzheimer's. And so I am well aware of the need for keeping hope and heart alive and sharing care. All right, so let's do this. I am pleased to introduce our keynote speaker. She comes to us with a wealth of knowledge and over 50 years of experience in working with older adults and their families in long-term care facilities and in the community. She has taught at the University of Washington School of Social Work and with the certificate program in gerontology for over 30 years. She is the author of the book Care Sharing, a reciprocal approach to caregiving and care receiving in the complexities of aging, illness, or disability, and is currently serving on the University of Washington State Dementia Action Collaborative. Known for her positive and motivational attitude, she believes that keeping a sense of hope is critical in taking care of ourselves and those with whom we share in our work. So now, without further ado, let me introduce you to our speaker, Marty Richards.
Good morning. I am so pleased to be here this morning and to share with all of you. I am in Port Townsend, Washington, and I hope that soon my slides will be up and we'll be able to start what we're going to be talking about. As I talk about hope and heart in sharing care, I'm very aware how difficult the role of caring is. As are many of us on this call, both professional and personally, dealing with this. Currently, I am a long-distance caregiver for my sister, who's much younger, who is struggling with MS and a variety of issues in Lawrence, Kansas. So today, as I'm talking to all of you, and I wished I could be there in person, I'm also talking to myself, because I believe that even in the midst of the tough stuff, we can have hope. If I could have the next slide. One of the things that I know for sure, and it's a basic premise for today, is that caregiving, care receiving, which I like to call care sharing, stresses reciprocity. It goes back and forth. One of the very hopeful things that I've learned in the last 4 years being a part of the Washington State Dementia Action Collaborative, which is a group of about 40 people appointed by the governor to deal with issues of dementia in our state, is that we are hopeful because not only are carers sharing with us, but people with dementia also sit on our team. And they have taught me so much about how to keep on keeping on. When I started in this field in the 60s, if you had a diagnosis of what was then called senility, you were written off. Now we're talking about dementia-friendly communities. We're talking about building on what people have to share, as well as dealing with all the tough stuff of caregiving. So as we talk today, I think I want to be sure that you understand, I don't think this is a Pollyanna thing. Caregiving's tough, but also there is hope. Hope and heart can flourish in these difficult times, especially now in the time of COVID. And when I talk about family, I'm not talking about blood or marriage relationship, although it can be that. I'm talking about what a very wise woman many years ago said to me about family. Family are those that you can count on. So as we move on our care sharing journeys, we are sharing them. We are not alone. One of the things I've been hearing in this whole conference for the sessions I've attended is you are not alone. I am not alone. We are in this together. We may have to connect with people in different ways than what we're used to, but we are not alone. And I'm also a great believer that creativity can help develop new avenues of connection. Early on, I didn't realize that my interest in poetry and music would be a way that I connect with people with dementia and with family members and with others in my community of faith and my community to get through when normal words and activities don't. So as we talk about care sharing, I want to emphasize that care sharing is the person giving care and the person receiving care, and I call these care partners. When we talk about care partners, we understand that people are equal and that the person receiving care and the person getting care have much to give to each other. And that's really a theme for what I'm going to talk about today, is that in the old days, we started talking around people who were sick, who had cancer, who had MS, who had dementia. Now we talk to that person. And in the spirit of the disability movement, which we celebrated the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, we should be always thinking about nothing about us without us. That the people who are getting care and the people who are giving care, the care partners, need to be in this together, and we're all equal as persons of dignity and respect. So in care partnering, every caring situation is unique. I can make some suggestions today. They may not fit for you, other things may. What I'd ask you to do is think about this and kind of apply it to your own situation, because there's no cookbook. And I do believe that strengths emerge as families change. What I've learned is that there's incredible strength and resilience in all of us. And that makes me hopeful as a professional, but it also makes me hopeful as a person who is now almost 75 years old and dealing with the issues that I was just talking about in my head in my 20s when I began working in this field. And probably the most important thing is that I have learned, and this is one chapter in my book, is that those who seem frail, who have a diagnosis of something, by the way, people are not their diagnosis, they are people first. Those who seem frail have much to teach us that are well. and we learn from each other, and that's a part of the care partnering. So if we talk about care partnering, we need to be aware that what we see are the most deeply human and divine in each other. That care partnering includes a network of people, no matter what their role, and it does not depend on the intellect. Care partnering doesn't matter if your brain is all there, if your body's all there. We are people serving people. And I like the idea of serving rather than helping. Because we live in a cure-based society, this is really difficult because we are involved in caring community. So care sharing leads to respect of all connected in the process. And this is a conference about balancing. Well, care sharing can lead to hope, but it also can help people balance all of their needs. So I'm going to turn now to look at this whole idea of hope. And Rob reminded you that you have a chat function down below. And what I would like you to do is to think about this question. How do you define hope? What's a word that you use to define hope for yourself and the person you care for and about? And if you could just put that in the chat, then I'm going to read some of those off if I can figure out how I get to the chat to see them. So put a word or two in there and let's see what comes up. A one-word definition of hope. Okay, here we go. Meaning, and from Rochelle, myself, balance, faith from Holly, optimism from Fred, positive from Diggs M. This is great. Dedication from Roger. All of you are using words that many of us use to think about what hope means. For me, surviving the day with patience. For parents, continuing to live at home with family and friends around them. And from Lynn, Jesus. From Rochelle, for my person, motivation. From Serena, confidence that all will work out. From Linda, another faith. These are great. And it's a beginning for you to begin to think about this idea of what hope is and how we can do this for ourselves. Here's another one that says that I can sustain the stamina needed. Hope for my loved one is that he can receive care at home as long as possible, although I support skilled nursing facilities in their care as well. And from Linda, all is well and all will be well. And we could probably go on for a long time talking about these, but I think it's important you get the idea to internalize this. And in a time when all things seem hopeless in COVID and caregiving, go back and think about some of these hope words. So let's move on to what hope is and what hope is not. Hope is not suggesting a situation will improve when it will not. It's not Pollyanna. It's not saying your cancer will be cured. It's not saying your dementia will go away. It's not saying you're not going to struggle with the effects of your stroke. It is not a disregard of the facts, and it certainly isn't wishful thinking. But hope is reasonable and directed by what I call bounded choices. So by bounded choices, and this is important in our hope, because sometimes hope is about the tiny things, not about the big things. So I am a person being cared for, and my hope is that I can stay independently alone, but I've had 4 falls, and it's really clear that I'm going to have someone in the home to help me, be it a family member, professional help. So my choices are to be independent, but not completely independent, but having some help, and my choices are bounded by the fact that if I'm totally alone, I'm going to probably fall. Hope is a half-full perspective rather than a half-empty perspective, and finding little things that bring joy. And for me, I know I'm in trouble when I can't see the little things bringing me joy anymore. And figure out what brings you joy and focus on that. Maybe it's a new bud on a tree. Maybe it's the hummingbird feeder that I have outside of my house where the hummingbirds feed every day. So I think Martin Luther King said it well, really truly, that everything that's done in this world is done by hope. And I think ultimately, even in the overwhelming tasks that we have as caregivers and the overwhelming feelings of struggle that we have as care receivers, it's important to keep this idea of hope in mind. So let's talk about hope specifically. And this is kind of a busy slide, but let's unpack it a little bit. So years ago, in the 90s, I heard two nurses speak about hope. And they had done studies about people who had hope and how they did better in their situation with ill health. And they broke it down in several ways that I think are important for us to think about today. First of all, they talked about hope being a transcendent process. And in this, how we deal with suffering. Now, Viktor Frankl, some of you know, was the survivor of the Holocaust. And he said, despair is suffering without meaning. And I know one of the hope words that came up from people was this idea of meaning. And part of hope has to do with this idea of how we find meaning as caregivers and how the people that we care for and about find meaning as a care receiver. This is helpful. It's kind of esoteric, but then the nurses talked about this idea of hope being part of a rational thought process where people have goals, resources, the person's active involvement, personal control as possible, and time. So let's look at these. If I have, and this is for many of us, the day-to-day nitty-gritty of life. If I have a goal to get up in the morning, my mother-in-law, when she was 99 and very frail, she took care of a bird, and in the long-term care facility she was in, the staff helped her. Her goal was to get up and get moving and take care of Birdie Bird. Resources become important, and we're hearing a lot about resources at this conference, both external resources like the AAA or like AGE and AERP and the other groups you're going to be hearing about, but it also talks about the internal resources that we have as people. It also, hope means that people have active involvement in their lives. Instead of having an idea, just do it to me world, people say, I can act on my world. The personal control one is the hardest one of hope, because as we struggle with chronic illness, as we struggle with changing physical and mental issues and related emotional issues, having control becomes very difficult. But having hope means I have control of this piece. And this is where I think where the caregiving journey and the care receiver journey and hope all come together. And then probably the hardest of all, and what we have the least of all time, is time. Never enough time to do everything. So we've got hope being a transcendent process, a rational thought process, and the whole school of philosophy, or excuse me, psychology about that. And then it's a relational process. And this is what I think is important that we as carers share with each other. I love to tell the story that actually happened in my community of faith many years ago when an older man who had been widowed was sitting next to me, and our pastor was preaching about we need to be with each other in the holding times, the times where we're waiting for a diagnosis. We're waiting for somebody to come that's come back from the war. We're waiting to hear about whether something has happened. And she said, in those times, we need to stand shoulder to shoulder. And literally, this gentleman sat next to me and leaned into me like this. And the idea of being shoulder to shoulder is that when we have 4 legs to stand on rather than 2, we're stronger. And I like this image, and I think it's the key to hope in care sharing, is that we stand shoulder to shoulder with each other in support groups, in families, and one-to-one with the person that we care for and about. And then for many of us, the characteristics of hope have to do with our spiritual beliefs, how we deal with the religious principles and practices. One of the things that I know to be true is that many of the caregivers I know rely on prayer. They rely on the religious principles of serving others, of receiving and giving care. They rely on rituals of that church. Many of us are struggling now because we can't get to our religious services or our spiritual services. But this characteristic of hope and our faith and our belief system becomes very important. There are people in our communities of faith who would help us, but sometimes we're not honest about what we're dealing with. So I hear from some people, how are you? And I ask them on a Sunday morning and they say, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm just fine. And we know they're not. But hope is knowing that other person is there. As I've been dealing with my sister, I have a friend who will say to me, how's your sister doing? And we have a whole prayer system around that. It's important. Whatever works for you in your own spiritual and religious belief system, it may not be formalized, it may be more individualized, but lean back on that. Lean back on those people who are there for you that you need to be honest about, and that can lead to hope. So hope is important. Let's move on to how hope relates to the spiritual needs that we have as carers. Now, this is from some work that was done by Highfield and Carson in 1983. Again, nurses, if any of you out there are nurses, they have wonderful work that's been done on hope. And again, they emphasize the caregiver's need for meaning and purpose in the caregiving role. Every relationship goes deep into the spirit. Remember, there is meaning in the act of caregiving itself. There is a need to give love. We all who are in caregiver roles, professionally or personally, have a need to give that love. But it also is a need to receive love and being open. How have you experienced spiritual gifts from the person that you care for? And then there's a need for forgiveness, hope, and creativity. And I think these needs are important as we look at that spiritual aspect of hope. We need to also look at how hope and heart are related. Now, some of us are old enough to remember Latin and to know that COR, the core of core, is in Latin heart. And they're the heart of the words courage and encourage. And we need to be about having that courage as carers when we get up every morning. And we need to encourage others. We try to avoid discouragement, although it's tough. I think really key, and I've heard this from so many caregivers over time, it's important to see each moment that we have as sacred with the people we share with. And then I want to talk about the story of the starfish. And some of you probably know this story. If we could have the next slide. The starfish, well, first of all, let's go back one, Rob, I missed it. I just want to share this quote from Václav Havel. Hope is not about believing that we can change things. Hope is about believing that what we do makes a difference. And actually, that was shared with me by a caregiver. And I think we can't change the cancer, we can't change the stroke, we can't change the dementia right now. But what we do and how we relate to people, it makes a difference. Put that on your forehead to remember. And now the starfish story. So some of you know this story of the little boy who's walking along the beach and he sees a starfish and he throws it back into the water and someone stops him and says, there's so many starfish on the beach. How is that going to make a difference? And he keeps picking up starfish and throwing them back in the water. And the little boy looks up at the man and says, made a difference for that one. And I think this is the key. It's not about believing that we can change the whole world, but we can change some small aspect. And for me, that's hope. So I think it's important that we stay connected to keep hope in community. My friend who calls me to make sure that I'm okay with my sister says to me, not how are you, but what is on your heart today? And then you have to be willing to listen. But I think this is a really important thing we do in community and sharing with each other. And it's okay in many situations when we're confronted with something to say, I don't know what to say. I think it's important to use technology and remember that the phone is technology. And please remember this, I'm going to be reinforcing it later on. But asking for assistance is a strength, not a sign of weakness. You know, we often hear it's more blessed to give than to receive, but I think we also need to think about receiving as a strength and how important that is. My phone is not supposed to be ringing. Okay, so I think it's important that we understand that hope changes, that hospice has taught us when we first get a diagnosis that we want everything possible done to make sure that we get the care we need. As the illness goes on, we realize we might need treatment. Then we want the best treatment possible. But even in hospice, as we move on towards our end, hope may change to want to not be in pain. And then as the illness goes on, we may not want to die alone. And so hope changes over time. I think hospice really has taught us that very well, if any of you are caring for someone at the end of their life. And this afternoon, I'll be doing a session about what happens to us on the caregiving journey when our loved one is at the end of life or has died. So hope is important and hope changes, and we're all vessels of hope for each other. So now I have another question that I'd like to ask you that you all can put a chat answer in, and that is, how do you deal with stress? What are the causes of your stress? It's one question. And how do you know when you are stressed out? So if you just take a minute to write in a couple of answers there, and then we'll look at that. Okay, some answers here. Walk, no energy, not having enough time, I'm stressed, have too much confronting me at the same time. Stress is resistance, the constant need for help by both my parents, and when I'm eating a big bag of gummy bears on the way home, I know that one. Causes a fear of an unknown day to day. I'm stressed when I can't sleep. Caregiving, when I'm short-tempered, not knowing what it's going to be like from moment to moment. That's a tough one. Really good answers here. Causes anxiety, not knowing, stretched thin. All of these things are part of our lives. Sleep disturbances, anxiety, not knowing. All of these things are important. And as you deal with trying to find hope in your own life, I think it's real important that you begin to think about what your personal causes of stress are and how you can deal with them. And some of these came up. Never enough time, family members who need us 24/7. One that I didn't see that I think is really difficult, More things are coming in. Body tightens and shake. But the rocky relationships, if we've had a difficult relationship with the person we're caring for, or our kids are telling us what we ought to be doing for mom or dad, or our partner and we are having difficulties because of changes in a 50-year or 60-year relationship, and our partners don't understand what's going on. It's been described to me as a sense of too muchness, and I think that's a good way to put it. And I think some of the other issues are the larger world around us. Man, I have had to cut back on my TV watching and my news hearing because I just can't deal with any more about COVID-19 and all the other issues in the world. Not that they aren't important, but they add stress in a way beyond even the day-to-day issues in my own caregiving journeys. Loss and grief, and there's no way to grieve. Lack of having adequate resources. And I hope this whole balancing on the journey, balancing yourself on the journey, that you've learned about some resources, or if you don't have them already, that you make sure you go to the website and get this information, because Rob and Melissa and Patty and everybody out there has let all kinds of resources be available to you. And then one that I struggle with all the time, internal needs for perfection. And yesterday, Amy Goyer really had a perfect line for this that I think relates to this that I want to share. I can do anything, but I cannot do everything. I'm putting that one on my forehead. So let's look at how we deal with stress. First of all, and we had a good session with Faith Unger and Lori Hill on Monday about stress, and I would suggest you go back and look at their slides too. But I think it's important to name your stress, what it is you're dealing with. Remember that you're not alone, and set realistic boundaries on what you can do. I have difficulty with that. The next thing is to remember the small successes. Like that starfish. Keep in mind that starfish. Find persons with whom you can share your stress. A 103-year-old friend of mine many years ago, a woman named Ingrid, bless her soul, said, find persons with whom you can share your stress. And she said, in response to that was, find someone who loves you with your warts. Loves you with your warts. I think that's a hopeful sign. And set up a personal de-stress plan. We're going to talk about that in a second. And yes, we heard earlier on the introduction, the quote from Lena Horne, it's not the load that breaks you down, it's how you carry it. In my slides, I have this one. The difference between stumbling blocks and stepping stones is how you use them. Another way to put it. But I think this graphic really does, or this picture really does show us a way that we can use even the stumbling blocks to move forward in dealing with our stress, and can lead us to be open to having a hopeful way of dealing with the world and with the caregiving journey. And so a part of that is to reframe our situations to maintain a sense of hope. And I love this story, and some of you may know it. And you see this baseball player and say, well, what does a baseball player have to do with having to have a sense of hope? Well, the story is told about a little boy who's playing baseball with himself, and he's throwing the ball up, and he's taking the bat, and he's swinging the bat at the ball as he misses it. And he says, I'm the best batter in the world. And he throws the ball up again, and he takes the bat. I'm the best batter in the world. And then he misses. The third time he throws the ball up and he misses, and he takes the bat again. And finally he says, you know, that's really some good pitching. And I think that's how we need to reframe our situations to maintain a sense of hope. That we need to think about taking, yes, the hard things and dealing with them, but also building on resilience. And we hear a lot about resilience these days. And, you know, I think in spite of all of the struggles we've had with COVID and other things in this country, we've learned that we have resilience in many ways as communities and as a country. Building on resilience means bouncing back from difficult times. It means trying to stay positive about the future, even in dealing with the stuff that happens to us day to day. And again, this whole issue of meaning and purpose, having a purpose for moving forward. A caregiver once said, love doesn't solve everything, but it keeps you there. And as you care for and love that person in whatever way you can, you're still keeping a sense of hope alive. And I love this little flower breaking through the pavement. This is resilience, because our lives are often like that pavement, and sometimes something breaks through. Maybe it's a friend who sends a note. Maybe it's somebody who is there and calls one day because they've just been thinking about you. And maybe it's your internal sense that you are loved by the community, by people around you, and by a higher power, if that's your belief system. It's growing and getting stronger in spite of difficulties, and it's living in life's reality without being overwhelmed. This next quote from Rachel Naomi Remen. I don't know if you know her book, Kitchen Table Wisdom, but she also wrote a wonderful book called My Grandfather's Blessing, Stories of Strength, Refuge, and Belonging. And she said, and I think this is true in our caregiving journey as well, we don't serve the weak or the broken. What we serve is the wholeness of each other and the wholeness of life. Yesterday on the discussion session, Melissa Crawford from the AAA talked about the personhood of people. That's what we serve when we're the caregiver. And that part of the care receiver that's still whole, the sense of humor, the smile, the ability to share in some ways, is what we serve, even as we deal with the tough stuff of never having enough time and the worry and the struggles of all the things that came up on our stress list earlier. So how do we make a difference? Please hear this. We do make a difference in the lives of the persons we care for. That's hope. We do make a difference. It doesn't feel like it at the time. What makes a difference for you, for the person that you care for? Just take a moment and put something in the chat about what makes a difference in the lives of the persons we care for and what makes a difference for you. Few things are coming in now, being in their life of this weird journey on together, being fully present for them. Thank you for those really good answers. Sweet moments between the big stuff. Ah, well put. Doing whatever you do for them with a good heart. Thank you for those. Those are really powerful statements. Remember that small gestures can have great value. Here's another one. The difference is knowing that the person is living another day, knowing that I'm doing all I can. Yeah. Savor moments and be present. Find little blessings. And someone just added here, laughter has made such a difference. We're going to talk about humor in just a minute. I like this quote too from Rebecca Solnit, who's a recent author, who talks about hope being an embrace of the unknown and the unknowable, an alternative to the certainty of both the pessimist and the optimist. Here's one more response for the being grateful for the moment. and others are coming in now. Well, keep working on that for yourself, because I think that's an important way. Sometimes we go to workshops and we think, I'm going to do something about that. Go back and reflect on that, because that's important. I think stress and hope are important to look at as well. Hope keeps life in balance. It assists in seeing the glass half full. It's saying, I am doing the best that I can, or for me, what I did was good enough. Some of us go back and look back and say, I should have, I could have, I would have. But the reality, remember, you did the best you could with the information you had in the moment. Please remember that. Realistic hope manages difficulty. Ask yourself, what did you do in the past? What did you do when you had challenges in the past? What did you do to overcome them? Can you adapt that process now? Sometimes we think, I'm just so overwhelmed, I can't even think. But then we remember we used humor to get through. Or we remember that we were able to problem solve pretty well, or whatever. Or set up a nice plan to get through each day in a small bit and piece of what we needed to do. So we try to live in life's reality without being overcome. And I think that's hope. We can always breathe deeply. I know when I'm stressed, I forget to breathe, and someone has to say, breathe deeply. So maybe we can just take a moment now and breathe deeply. We can build on resilience. And remember always that we are people loving and caring about other people. Or as some would say, we are persons loving and caring about other persons. Thomas Kitwood, in all of his work with dementia, has really stressed the idea of personhood of people with dementia. But I think that's true with anybody who's receiving care. They are people they are not the disease process that they have. So hope and gratitude. The big question is, what has your caregiver taught you? Gratitude is remembering what is right and not what is wrong. I think it's important to keep a journal. And this is trite, but it works. Write down 5 things for which you are thankful each night. And again, remembering you did the best you could. Health, humor, and joy. Humor gets us through the bleakest of times. I can't even tell you the jokes I've heard from people going through difficult times because they're sort of X-rated, but it got them through. Practice wonder. See that tree blooming. See that sunrise. I live in Port Townsend, Washington. We have beautiful weather this summer. And the sunrise and watching the sunrise over the mountains is really important to me. It's wonder all the time. Take care of your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health, and tell the people around you what you're dealing with. And again, breathe deeply. We need to do that. And I love the next picture because it relates to the theme of the conference, but I also think it shows us how humor can help us to stay on track. And don't we sometimes feel like that elephant standing on the ball in terms of what we're trying to do? And somebody had just said on the chat, laughter's made such a difference. For the person I care for, when he says he appreciates me, the gratitude people, being grateful for the moments. So now, what does this all mean? I've kind of broken it down. And again, this sounds kind of cookbooky. Please, like they say in AA, remember that each situation is unique. Take what is helpful and just leave the rest. So if we could have the next couple of slides, I call it an ABCs for keeping hope. A is asking for assistance. Remember, it's a strength. B, be present to your loved one. Be there. Try to spend a few minutes each day where you're not worried about bathing or toileting or feeding or somebody wandering away, but just to be present to that person, your partner, your mom, your dad, your sister, your kid, whomever you're caring for, to be present for that person. Celebrate the moment and small successes. If any of you have walked the journey of rehab with somebody post hip fracture or post stroke, remember to celebrate. We know the importance of celebrating that little moment of walking a couple of feet or having a small success. As I mentioned earlier, develop an attitude of gratitude. I mean, it's cliche, but it's true. When we are thankful for what we have. And expect the unexpected. For sure, whatever you think is going to happen may not happen the way you expected it, may happen in a totally different way, and we need to be flexible. F is find and build on your own resilience. Sometimes it's talking to a counselor or your pastor or spiritual director or someone else that you trust to begin to build on that internal resilience that most of us have. Gain information about the isms in caring and work to change them. We heard earlier today from the AARP presentation of Jessica, how AARP is working with that organization and people in the community to deal with the kinds of concerns in long-term care. There's lots of isms in our society, ageism and ableism and other things that go into why people who are older and struggling or who are disabled and struggling have difficulties. And part of kind of reaching out a bit, even as you deal with the day-to-day caregiving, is working to change them. Maybe you can't go out and demonstrate, but you might write a letter. I know this is more time, but if you can find that, it means you're moving forward, you're moving out. Honor your spiritual belief system. Make sure they know where you are and be honest with them. Infuse humor when needed. Humor really keeps us going. And many of you said that in the chat. Journal about your situation and your feelings. Keep yourself fit. Exercise online, walk. Some of you mentioned that. Now, some of us aren't able to go out and go to the places we used to go. So there's all kinds of stuff online right now to keep us fit. I don't always use it. I should. Learn from your care partner. Again, this is what does that person who used to be perceived in our society as frail, but now is an active part of the caregiving relationship. Make a connection plan even when staying home. And Amy Goyer in her session on long distance caring, and Faith and Lori in their session on stress, the plans for how you set things up becomes so important. Somebody's not getting sounds. Okay, I'll try better here. Name and work through loss, grief, and forgiveness. Deal with the unfinished business. Again, this afternoon session is going to be all about that. Open yourself to vulnerability. You don't have to say, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine all the time. You can say, I'm struggling. Do you have time to listen? If you're a support to somebody who's doing hands-on caring, take that time to listen. I hope, Linda, now that you can hear me better, I'm going to go closer to the mic. Let's go back here. Prepare quiet places to recharge. Where's your own place that's quiet that you can get away? Maybe it's the bathroom and you pull the door shut. Quit feeling guilty about what you shoulda, coulda, woulda done. And I hear people saying this all the time. They spend so much time in the worry and feeling guilty that they don't spend the time in the moment. Recognize reciprocity in relationships, the back and forth, the giving and the receiving. For me, that's hope. Stand shoulder to shoulder with others, as I mentioned in the example of my friend Emil so many years ago. Tell stories. Let people know your story about what you're dealing with and build on those narratives. Let the person who's being cared for tell their story. It's powerful. It's more important that you tell your story than it is to hear it from a lawmaker or me or somebody else who's a professional caregiver. So when you can, tell your story and remember that you're not alone. Utilize rituals and rites to maneuver transitions. There's a lot of things that can be done that are religious rituals, but also secular rituals. One of the things that I'm really aware of is anniversaries of things. So the person that you care for has dementia and you've been married 60 years. How do you celebrate that now in a way that makes sense for you and them? It may not be the way you celebrated 50 or 60 years ago. Okay, got it. Thank you. I'm glad the sound is back. Always visualize the glass half full and caring. This is a tough one for me. I tend to see all the negatives and forget about the positives. Work on unconditionally sharing love, no matter the mentation or the physical issues that people have. Examine your situation. Give yourself permission to take care of yourself and your care partner. Yearn to understand that hope changes over time, as we so well learned from hospice, and zealously keep courage and encouraging each other. That is the key to keeping heart in hope. And so we are all caregivers, and we're all doing this stuff in different ways. We all have strengths. We all have areas where we need help. And remember, as we share this next section just for a few minutes, that everyone is different. So here's a few things I would suggest for keeping hope alive. Again, figure out what makes sense for you, throw away the rest. Make a self-care list for responding rather than reacting negatively to life stresses. Good example from Amy yesterday. So you have all of the information ready in case of a crisis, like durable powers of attorney and names of medications and all this ready to go. So if you have to run for the ER at some point, it's there. That's responding, being ready, rather than, oh my gosh, we have to run to the ER, I don't have any of the paperwork. And that's becoming more and more of an issue as people with COVID and other diseases find themselves in care situations they hadn't planned to be. There are issues related to mental aspects of taking care of your mind. It doesn't have to turn to mush. Emotional aspects, depression, feeling down are common. Keeping the spiritual aspects alive, and keeping your body active, exercising, walking, those things that many of you are already doing. Think of a word theme for your list, like endurance or joy or whatever seems to fit your list of words for your own self-plan. Ask others to assist you, especially those of you who are caring for a partner and your kids are telling you how you should think and what you should do. It's really interesting to me. My daughter is 50 tomorrow. I now have a daughter eligible for AARP, but it's interesting to me how protective she's gotten of me and my husband in recent years. And I need to talk with her periodically of not being overprotective of me. So we have to talk a lot about this assisting, even though right now in my life, my husband and I are independent. Put the plan that you write for yourself in a prominent place as a reminder. Now, this picture, when I talk about joy, I love because somebody said, and I don't know where this came from, and that is that joy is love dancing. There can be humor and there can be joy in the care sharing experience. And for me, that is hope. And I want to close this section because we'll have some time for Q&A with a quote from Kathleen Fisher, who is, some of you may know, is a social worker and a theologian who happened to be a student of mine here in Seattle, but I think it encapsulates hope in a way that really brings together what I've been trying to say today. Hope is an act of collaboration. It cannot be achieved alone. We offer grains of fragments of hope to one another so that everyone's sense of possibility can grow. In this way, we can do together what might seem impossible alone. So think about that we can do these things because we are in community. Our community may look different, but our community helps us, and our community encourages us, and our community brings us hope. And I hope today that we remember that there is hope and light at the end of the tunnel. And so I think it's time for Q&A. Are there 2 more slides or not? I don't think so. Okay. All right, Rob or Melissa.
Hello. Thank you so much, Marty. Such incredibly wonderful information. And thank you all, everyone who's joining us today. Such great things that you're sharing with us. One thing that came to my mind, Marty, while you were talking about seeing the person, one of our founders was Bert Kruger-Smith, who was an author who wrote a number of books on caregiving. And she had a statement that we carry in our hearts with our organization, which is, she said, "I see you, old woman, but I see you and not the old."
Uh-huh.
And that's, you know, that to me is just the epitome of person-centered care. We are going to answer your questions now. We want you to make your statements, give us your questions, and let us know what's going on in your life as a caregiver. We're going to bring back Melissa Crawford from the Area Agency on Aging to join us on this conversation. And I want to introduce you to Cecilia Bliss. She is also with the Area Agency on Aging. She's going to help facilitate our Q&A. I wanted to start us off with a quick question here. Because, Marty, like you said, right now we have so much being thrown at us in our world between political upheaval and social upheaval, and we've got a pandemic that's happening around the globe. And you pile all that on top of our caregiving journeys. How can we separate that off out of our brains and be able to just concentrate on the person that we're caring for, and most importantly, concentrating on caring for ourselves?
Yeah, because a big part of that, of the caring for yourself, happens. I have to turn the TV off and the radio off. I have to say, okay, I'm going to give myself, and Barry Jacobs, who I know you've had as a speaker at your conferences before, talks about not catastrophizing about things and thinking the absolute worst. There's a lot of hard stuff, but I have to remove myself in a place where, yes, that's happening, and yes, I need to vote, and yes, I need to deal with that. But for right now, I need to pull myself away. I need to be in a space where there's no radio, there's no TV. Maybe there's soothing music, maybe there's a time for a prayer, for meditation, for sharing, but to go back inside. And it may be when I'm sitting in the bathroom, because it's the only safe place that I'm not being followed around. A lot of caregivers tell me that. But I think it has to do with shutting out what you can and trying not to bring it in. And worrying about what you can deal with, and sort of trying to let others deal with the rest. With my sister, and having had to call the EMTs twice in the last month, I get so worked up, and yet I can't physically lift her off the floor when she falls. And so I have to say, okay, the EMT is there now. They've talked to me. They've done what they needed to do. I have to let it go. But I can get so worked up. And when somebody wrote, you know, when they're under stress, they eat gummies. Well, I'll tell you, I put on weight during this COVID time and this time with my sister. And I have to watch that, because if I'm overweight and not eating correctly, then that's just making that worse. So I try to pull away into a silence or a quiet place to try to regroup. Otherwise, all I'm doing is I'm creating a lot of issues for the person I'm caring for.
Yeah, you're just feeding that anxiety instead of dealing with that anxiety. Melissa, I want to bring you in on this because we're both here locally in the Central Texas area. Marty, you had talked about not internalizing all of the stress that's coming in. And Melissa, we know that one great way to do that is with support groups. And
Absolutely.
so let's talk very briefly about support groups here in the Central Texas area for caregivers.
Well, with the Area Agency on Aging, and again, I know we have some people that might be coming in that's not in the Central Texas area. So I would encourage you to reach out to an Area Agency on Aging in your area. They can help you find local resources for wherever you're at. And we do have some support groups. We have, well, we don't have support groups. We have different classes for different caregivers and individuals that are struggling with chronic disease, self-management. But we also have services that come along and support the caregiver, such as caregiver support services for in-home supports. But we can also offer like mental health services. We can offer health and safety, come in and provide some help for you with some health and safety in the home, putting in grab bars and things, a lot of things that can reduce some stress. We have events like this, the Striking a Balance Caregiver Conference. We also have a session where we can pair you up with a professional that can talk to you about your caregiving journey and maybe what kind of support you need in caring and sharing with your care receiver. We can do emergency response buttons. I know Marty was talking about that earlier, and I can't remember if that was before or during the session, and then yesterday we were talking about that, how important that is to also bring in some peace of mind to know that you can get some immediate help if something were to go awry. So there's, and with that caregiver support, we will provide an assessment, and it is very person-centered. I can't stress that enough. You're not, you know, a lot of times individuals will come in or organizations will come in and they will do an assessment and then they will tell you, well, this is what I see and this is what you need. And they're not really listening to the caregiver. They're not listening to the care receiver, to the other family to find out what their story is. Where are they on their journey? What are they looking for? And we can give you some information and tell you how it works and how it could benefit and how it's benefited others. But at the end of the day, we really want to know what is it that you need and how can we come alongside that. We have information referral and assistance. So if you're looking for a specific type of group for Parkinson's, for cancer, for dementia, if it's Alzheimer's Texas, we can, you know, find out where you're at, who you're looking for, what kind of support you need, and get you numbers or make referrals for you for those different types of support groups. So we just have a plethora of things that we can offer and come alongside, and then it's up to you to kind of work with your family and your group on what that care plan looks for you. And I just want to add this, you know, our services are short-term and temporary, but it's an awesome opportunity then to do some of the things that Marty's talked about, to take that time to regroup, to evaluate. It gives you just that break that you might need while you can develop that long-term care plan and get some hope and get some tools in place. So, because it's a journey, it's a long, and it can be, for some, it's a really long-term event. Yeah, we definitely want to partner and be a part, be a catalyst for families in our region.
If I could just add something here, somebody just came in, there's a caregiver cafe with Lynn Greenblatt. I don't know what that is, but part of what we're doing here, and I've been a part of, but we aren't doing it virtually, but some people are, is we have a memory cafe where people with dementia come with their loved ones and we just have coffee. And somebody who came who had dementia was asking, you know, she just looks like any of us, and somebody outside said, well, who are the people with dementia here? It's the normalizing, the, you know, where are people at? What are their issues? And the other point related to what Melissa was saying that I think is important is there's hope when we realize that the care receiver and the caregiver have a right to fail. Is if we go in as professionals or people do and say, this is what you need to do, and you don't take into account what that person really wants, you know, we are going to fail, but people need to have a sense, there's a part that I heard many years ago from a caregiver or a care receiver was independence is knowing when to ask for help. That's key. But the other part is, some things people try aren't going to work, and they have a right to try different things, unless they're in danger themselves or another person. And I think that's something to think about as well. There's a lot of questions coming in too, I see, Rob. So.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I wanted to just add in here that both Age of Central Texas and the Area Agency on Aging have one-on-one for caregivers, so you can contact us no matter where you are in your journey, and we can help you kind of connect those dots to the resources that you need. Melissa, you said it beautifully yesterday. We're going to meet you where you are on your journey. You had mentioned the Memory Cafe. The Manchac Road Austin Public Library hosts a Memory Cafe here in Austin, and there's information on that on the AGE website. We also sent you in the resources that were sent to you, and we're going to send them again at the end of this week, a list of all of the respite groups that are available in Central Texas. So we'll make sure that we get those to each and every one of you watching. Cecilia, I'm going to throw it to you because we got some great questions.
Yeah, so we do have a few questions coming in now. I think this is a good one for Marty. How can a caregiver shift their thinking if they're hoping for a cure, but a cure isn't necessarily possible?
Boy, that's tough, because so much of our energy in our society goes to the curing culture that we have. And I don't have a magical answer. I think that this is where living in the moment, celebrating the gifts of being together. Somebody in the chat earlier on said being with that person day to day, that's important. But the reality of changing our minds from that, and even when we know this is true, and I've worked in this field 50 years, I deal with my own chronic conditions. I want them to be cured. I want them to be better, and I can maintain. So the energy goes into how to make the best quality of life for this person right now where they are now, and moving away from I'm going to solve this cancer with another chemo because the chemos aren't working, or I'm going to do whatever to make a cure, but this is going to make it better for care. And I think an example of this might be a person who's had a stroke, who's lost their ability to speak. So maybe they're not ever going to get their speech back, but we may find different ways for them to communicate. And again, it doesn't solve the speech coming back, but it opens avenues for communication. Again, somebody just put a CDMSP word, focus on symptom management for better quality of life. Yeah, and that's exactly what I think can help in this regard. But it's not easy. We don't magically turn that off. If we have a headache, we pop a pill and we hope the headache goes away. So chronic illnesses that we're dealing with in the caregiving journey, with older people, chronic disease self-management. Thank you, Jessica. It is a part of that. Actually, I've taken that class and it's quite good, but I forgot that it was CD, whatever. I don't do well with acronyms.
Like disease self-management.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. And I hope that answers the question for the person, and maybe Melissa or Celia, you have a comment about that, but it's not easy.
Yeah, there is no real, fast, easy answer there, but I think being mindful of the way you're thinking is probably a good start. And so if you're aware that you're thinking about this and you're seeing this conflict, being mindful, being aware of how you're thinking, what you're thinking, and where that thinking is leading you to, because as caregivers know, your reserves are really, being tapped into. And so you really want to know that you don't have an unlimited supply of mental, emotional, spiritual, physical reserves. So you want to be aware of what you're thinking about, how you're thinking, how does that thinking affect you? If every time you start thinking about you're having anxiety or something, know that it's depleting you of things that you really want to invest somewhere else. So like you said, a lot of times we're bombarded with information. Know that it is information. And then we get to choose how we handle it. So maybe there's not a cure today. Maybe there's going to be a cure. We can have hope that maybe there's going to be some treatments coming online. Maybe there's not. Like you said, accept the reality of what the situation is. Don't ever give up hope, but make it be hope, not distress, not despair. It's hope, but then engage in where you are today. Where am I today? And maybe this is something I'm wanting, but my care receiver has moved on into acceptance. And they just want to know what they can do today. Help me today with what I'm wanting to accomplish today. Help me find meaning today, and not maybe always trying to drag this thing around of maybe I can one day, I don't want to waste today.
Yeah.
And so let's be there and get, like you said, find someone else that you can share with and you can talk with about that feeling that you're having. If it's starting to be despair, maybe not so much your care receiver because they're dealing with a lot already. And sometimes we're going to share with them certain things, but there should be other individuals that can come along and help you with that emotional heaviness that you're going through.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great.
Celia.
Yeah, so we do have a couple more questions. I think this is a good one for both of you and certainly very on topic. So if hope is a collaboration, how do I regroup, gain or regain hope when there's resistance, uncooperativeness, and a lack of appreciation from my care receiver?
That's tough.
Yeah, none of these are easy questions
No,
today.
they aren't. Part of the problem is it's being mindful of why you're doing what you're doing. And it goes back to this sense of meaning and purpose as a carer. I grew up in my college teaching, in my religious teaching, my social work training. I've been given much in my life, therefore I give to others. And try not to expect that I'm going to get something back. But it is hard when somebody's actively saying, I don't care about you, or you're the worst caregiver ever, or they're, doing that, or even worse, somebody who's not a part of the situation, but long distance telling you how you should be caring. And I think the key for me has always had to go back into my own internal belief system and saying, okay, I'm doing this because it's a part of meaning and purpose for me, but I may not get thanked. In fact, I may get yelled at and have gotten yelled at, and it's not pleasant. I mean, I get really upset. But if I don't do that, then I'm constantly just having those voices in my head of the negativity. So I have to go back and find that internal core and realizing you're not alone. The other thing is, everybody in this conference that I've listened to has said, you're not alone. You are not alone. And if you were together, you could see that at your tables and stuff. You can imagine virtually, there's 40 or 50 people on this call. And we're all struggling with the same kind of issues in one way or another. So I don't know if that answers, but I just think that there's no easy answer to that, and it doesn't come overnight. And gradually, we come to a sense of acceptance, and maybe we never do. Maybe we're going to get yelled at till the day that your care receiver is no longer in your care.
And Marty, I just want to add, one of the things that you said in your presentation is that as caregivers, we do this out of our own need to give love. And when we are dealing with somebody who is not appreciative of the love we're giving them, sometimes we just have to say to ourselves, I'm doing this for me. And that's good enough.
And just to add one thing, and that's absolutely correct, Rob, you and Marty, going back to yourself, and also to help move along with that is to remove that expectation. Because if you come in every day with the expectation that at some point they're going to understand the sacrifice you're making, that at some point they're going to understand that what you're doing is the best for them, as long as you have that expectation, you're going to continue to set yourself up for disappointment. So at some point, you may have to come to that place and say, you know, I understand that they don't understand, that this is my way of loving them and caring for them and sharing for them, and be understanding about that. Because if they were in the place, you know, mentally where they could be, if things were different, then they would see and they would appreciate that's the person you know that they would be, but they're not in that place. And at this time, they're not able to do that. And so you're going to show mercy and grace to them by not holding them to something that right now they don't have to give.
That's
so you
right.
kind of free them and remove that expectation so that you're not constantly being hurt by what's happening. And yes, it's a collaboration, and in areas though we can collaborate, and in some places, you know, we're going to have to hold it ourselves. And that's okay. You know, it's just for a season. This too shall pass.
I think that's wonderful information. I love that so much. And, you know, also when we're talking about caring for someone who has a cognitive issue, whether it's Alzheimer's or other type of dementia, they don't understand what's happening around them in many cases. I remember hearing Tam Cummings talking about dementia. She said that a person who has dementia lives 24/7 in a state of confusion. They know something's wrong, they just don't know what it is, and they don't know how to voice it. And so they will very often go to that lizard brain, which is the fight or flight. And so when you are caring for someone like that, you know, they tend to fight you constantly. And it's not because they're unappreciative, it's because they don't have any idea what's going on and no longer have the ability to understand what is going on. I think that's most important. And so, you know, we talk about meeting caregivers where they are. Sometimes a caregiver has to do the same thing. You have to meet the person that you're caring for where they are, because you can't bring them back to your world. You have to go to dementia world.
And you have to be compassionate with yourself. You can be the most compassionate caregiver, but sometimes we don't remember to do that, to have mercy and compassion for ourselves. And I think that's bottom line in keeping hope.
Yeah. Cecilia, we've got time for one more question, it looks like.
Yeah, it looks like we have one where that's a pretty straightforward. Melissa, I think you might, well, either of you could probably answer, but I'll start with Melissa. Could you recommend a very simple watch that a person can touch if they're alone or they need medical help? So, you know, that kind of emergency response, is there something in particular that you'd recommend?
Okay, so I don't know about a watch. Somebody else on here might know about a watch. Yes, we do work with different types of like emergency response buttons, and there are some that can be worn on the wrist depending on, you know, your loved one's situation, that they can push very easily. Sometimes the system is there in the home, but it can be two-way. Maybe they're out. We've got a lot of individuals that are caring for individuals that are out in a rural community. And no matter how much you tell them, they're going to go to the garden. They're going to go to their mailbox. It's a quarter of a mile away from the house. And so, you know, they have a button that they can use there. We have, we work with providers that have the GPS, but somebody else might know about a watch, you know, or that does the same type of service.
So it sounds like a good answer is call your AAA and talk to somebody.
Yeah, we can talk about some things. We can find that answer for you for where you're at. There's a lot of with technology now. There's so much out there. It's changing all the time, and it's really good. It's really good. We need this kind of stuff.
There's hope because of the technology, for sure.
Yeah. All right, Cecilia, thank you so much for helping us out today. Melissa, thank you for joining us. Marty, thank you so much for sharing your morning with us, all of your expertise, your knowledge, your wonderful advice. We are so grateful to have you, and we're grateful to have you with us as well today. We're so glad that you joined us for this session. We hope that you gleaned something that'll help you in your caregiver journey. As Marty said, take what you need and throw the rest of it away. I think that's brilliant. Or actually, better yet, just kind of store it away because you might need it later. Because,
tomorrow, right?
Yeah, our journeys change as we go. It was said twice this week in presentations that caregiving is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And along that marathon, things are going to change. And so that's why we've been doing this for 19 years, because your situation is going to change as you go. And we want to make sure that we arm you with everything you need to be successful in that journey. And as Marty and Melissa said, remember, you are never alone in this journey. You've got Age of Central Texas here to help you. You've got the Area Agency on Aging here to help you. You have other wonderful organizations throughout the community that exist solely to help you. And there is never, ever any shame in saying, I need some help, because every one of us needs it at some point in our life. So we want to thank you for joining us. We're going to remind you that we're going to send you not only a PDF of the PowerPoint from today, but all the resources that we've been talking about. So you will have that. We're going to post this video online just a little bit later in the week so that you can go back and see it again. And remember to give us a call anytime you need us. We've got another wonderful session this afternoon with Marty. We're going to talk about grief and what happens when our caregiver journey comes to an end and how we keep going from there. We hope that you'll join us, and we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.